Senator Rabe, how are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to talk about housing, my favorite topic.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited for you to be here. It's Friday afternoon. It's going to be fantastic. This is, believe it or not, this is my fifth interview of the day.
No way.
Yeah, it has been a crazy
Five in
day.
one day.
Next Thursday, I have six.
Oh my God.
It's great though. Like
Yeah.
I love every second of it. I am
Don't
excited.
your ears hurt?
No, do yours?
No, just from like getting smashed by the headphones.
No, but I also don't wear earrings. So like,
Oh, that.
yeah. Plus I have cauliflower ear. Like I got a goofy, I don't feel anything. I have no soul.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah. Listen, you and I have actually shared proximity geographically.
Yes.
You lived in San Francisco for a few years studying homelessness. You have moved all over the country dealing with housing issues. There is an article, or there was an article, I think, by Realtor that identified, said that Boise's median home price or something is going to be like $1 million in 5 years or something insane, which is wild. And even contemporarily, there was an article that I saw recently that said Boise had the second least affordable housing market in the country. I realize I'm part of the problem. I did it. I'm sorry. That being said, I am here. I would like to hear your thoughts on how we can address this. And again, the San Francisco SF Bay area is notorious for extremely expensive
Belly of
housing.
the beast. Yeah.
Belly of the beast. It is also home to the People's Republic of Berkeley, which has, the most most draconian rent control, potentially in the country outside of perhaps New York. But again, hit me with it.
Oh man. There's
a
so much
lot
to say there. Yeah, I have studied housing and I've looked at, what's happening to cities across the United States. And I think it's ridiculous. In one of the richest countries in the world, we have 1 million people living outside. 1 million people sleeping on the sidewalks, streets, shelters that don't have a home. And the primary reason why that is because of housing is not affordable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's
So we
unpack
can
this
dig
right
into
away.
that.
Let's dig into it.
'Cause
So
people
I actually took affordable housing when I was going to school at Berkeley. Believe it or not, that was a class that was taught. It was a decal class, which was taught by a student but sponsored by a faculty member. And one of the problems, they brought in a person in the nonprofit sector that was talking about one of the problems they ran into was not necessarily placing people, but recognizing when they placed people that were previously homeless, they had difficulty maintaining the housing because they still had habits that yielded unacceptable behaviors within a community setting, right? So like they ended up back outside. So it's not that we couldn't place them. It's that we were placing them multiple times because they'd like leave the stove on or they'd have, crazy neighbors over at like 4 a.m. or something like that.
I see what you're saying. And people with mental health issues, substance use disorders, they're much more likely to be homeless than people that don't have those issues, right? However, if housing is affordable, anyone can make it work. We look at cities across the United States and all kinds of data points you can look at, mental health, substance use, weather, number of people moving into an area. The only data point that actually directly correlates with the number of people who are homeless is the cost of housing. So I'll give an example of West Virginia. They have really serious issues with substance use disorders. A lot of people use drugs in West Virginia. A lot of mental health issues as well. They have no homelessness because housing is affordable in West Virginia. Think of
Wait, back up. Say this one more time. So West Virginia is a place that, because people would say, hey, look, the more the more substance abuse, the more likely you are to have homeless people. And you're saying it has an extremely high amount of usury and abuse, substance abuse, but that doesn't correlate. There's no correlation. There's no parallel with homelessness that they don't have people.
If you look at certain cities or states that have really high rates of substance use, that does not directly correlate with the number of people who are homeless. So,
what are the people like smoking crack and like drinking and stuff doing in West Virginia?
They're making it work. If your rent's, $300 a month, you can scrape by, pick up a few odd jobs, here or there, make it work. That's what we see. So, however, those folks, that are lower income or have, issues, they are more likely to end up homeless, especially in a market that's not affordable. And the less affordable your market gets, the more, those types of people, then just regular working families as well, end up homeless. And once you end up homeless, you're more likely to develop those
substance use problems,
mental health, physical health issues.
Right. The safety net needs to actually be a trampoline. It can't be a net that actually catches you. It has to be something that like bounces you out of it.
Quickly.
Because the every day that goes by that you maintain homelessness, you increase your probability of developing, substance abuse, starting to commit crime, things of that nature.
You're less likely to end up being financially independent,
right?
For the rest of your life. There's a really great metaphor to think about this that I like to use, which is musical chairs. And it's from a book that's called Homelessness is a Housing Problem that actually looks at a lot of this data. But, you have 3 chairs, okay? 4 people. One of the people has a broken leg. Who's not going to get the chair? It's going to be the guy with the broken leg. Sure. So that's kind of how the housing market works as well.
So essentially, if you insert any competition at all, the person who's in the lower end and not able to compete is going to end up without housing. So unless we have 10 houses with 10 people, if you have 9 houses with 10 people, the person who is least capable will naturally be the one that doesn't have it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, but like, what do we like? How does that work though? Like first off, we have an unaffordable housing market right now.
We do.
That does not, like, if we're the second worst in the country, you would assume, just like your West Virginia example, you would assume that we would be like the second worst in homelessness, but that's not true.
Well, we will end up in that situation.
But what are we right
stay
now?
Ahead of it. So, number of homeless people, like per capita, we're doing pretty good. But the number of people who are homeless has doubled over the last couple of years because over that same time period, this unaffordability crisis is pretty new to Idaho. Just 5 years ago, you could buy a house for in the 200s, a pretty nice house in Boise. That's, obviously not the case now. Housing prices have more than doubled. The cost of rent has increased by 40%. So if you're paying $1,000 just a few years ago, now you're paying $1,400. That's $400 extra a month. So this new unaffordability crisis, I think, is new to Idaho, which makes us really unique. And because of that, we've seen homeless rates double over the last 2 years. And I do think that trend will continue if we don't continue to invest in solutions. Luckily, our local governments are investing in some solutions. Our state's starting to think about housing more and doing more, which I'm excited to see. And then, we just got to all come together as a community and say, hey, we don't want Idaho, we don't want the Treasure Valley to end up like a San Francisco or a Portland or a Seattle. So let's stay ahead of this problem and talk about what we can do. And I think that's what we are doing, a lot of those things. So
at the core of affordable housing, there is the supply and demand argument, right? Which is bottom line of like, listen, if you only have 9 houses and you got 10 people, the people with the most, like, that's going to put pressure on it. Right. Yeah. And like, that's just the way this goes.
Yeah.
So first off, from like a community standpoint, I have no effect on like Toll Brothers to like build more houses. I also don't have an effect on a lower level, like, hey, let's get, condos or row houses. So what is it?
You do though.
Okay, how do you mean it? I do. No, I'm an idiot with a mic. I don't build anything.
Well, are you a YIMBY or a NIMBY?
I'm so terrified. I'm definitely not a NIMBY. I'm definitely not a NIMBY. I do live in an HOA. It was like, it's the first time I've ever lived in an HOA. I don't know, like, I see what you're saying, which is, hey, the more friction, the average, and again, to be clear, not a NIMBY is not in my backyard. So somebody who predominantly fights localized development around their areas, they want more housing and a more affordable housing in the abstract. They just don't want it to affect them. Yes. Right. And then a YIMBY is like, no, build the skyscraper. Like, let's go, baby.
Put it right next door. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have that necessarily. I don't like here we have cornfields and stuff where it's like, oh, no, just build. Like we have property rights that the NIMBY movement in more urbanized areas like say Berkeley or Oakland or San Francisco, you don't get the same leverage out of that.
We have spaces. Yeah, we have spaces to grow, which is great. However, we do have challenges with increasing density in a lot of neighborhoods, especially in the Treasure Valley. If you go to any planning and zoning hearing and I'll say Nampa,
sure.
For example, you see a lot of pushback from neighbors, and it does prevent housing from getting built.
How is that? I thought we had very strong personal property rights.
Well, I mean, whose property rights? It's the people that come out and testify, don't put this in my neighborhood, or is it the person that owns the parcel of land and wants to build on it? I think a lot of times what we see in planning and zoning commissions locally is the neighbors win out because they're the ones that elect city council members. And I think there's just a lot of pressure on city council members to listen to folks. And there are a lot of concerns brought up by neighbors when certain developers are getting built. I hear it all the time when I go knock on doors when I'm campaigning or out in the community. People are like, oh my gosh, they're building an apartment building, a couple blocks away. I'm doing everything. I'm writing my city council members, trying to make sure they're not doing it. They're asking me to stop the development. I'm like, sorry, I don't have that power, but as a state legislator, but there is a lot of NIMBY mindset, I think, that we deal with here. And I think it does prevent density, which is a problem because urban sprawl is okay, right? We need some of that. But it's very expensive. There's no, oftentimes not a lot of infrastructure built around it. It costs so much to build, the roads, sewer, water, trash all around it, and causes a lot of strain on our economy in a lot of ways. So I do think we need more density, but there's a lot of challenges to getting there.
Right. And we also have a real problem with taxation if we allow for more lower density single family home development. And again, this is just, I'm an idiot. This is just what people tell me, but they're essentially like, look, if you have an active ag plot, right? So say you have like a 40 acre or 50 or 100 acre, whatever, something that's developing revenue, the county actually, that's a net benefit to everybody around them. Every dollar that is, they receive essentially, it's like a 2 or 3x from every dollar that the county has to spend to maintain that place. They get like 3x back in revenue.
Right.
Whereas the exact opposite is true for single family houses. If you do like a low density single family residence, you're actually a net drain on the county, which is why you have areas like, for instance, the Bay Area in California, where we have really pushed out a lot of the agriculture. We've developed a lot of single family houses, and that's what, again, people like as you go kind of into the East Bay. And because of that, our taxes actually increased to sustain the same level of emergency services because, again, we don't have the tax base that we used to have from the agricultural settings.
That's happening here too. I mean, I grew up in Middleton, so, surrounded by farm fields, open spaces. It's all subdivisions now. It's crazy to see Star, Nampa, Caldwell. They're dealing with a lot of challenges and conversations around how do we preserve our ag land? Because yes, ag land has benefit to the taxes and revenue. It's hard to run a farm though.
Right.
Farmers want to sell because they can make money right now. Right. And hats off to them, because it's hard being a farmer too. It's tough work. So I do think we're seeing a lot of that happen here.
Yeah. Outside of
which
public
is good, but we still need more housing. So.
Right. So outside of public sentiment, which you're like, hey, look, Matt, you do have because don't go fight every subdivision because then that's gonna, obviously people
or apartment.
So aside from that, what are the big things? Because going
supply. Okay, so supply is a big thing. We do see issues not only with neighbors pushing back, but just zoning regulations themselves. Permitting requirements, permitting wait times, just the regulatory burden that's on developers to create housing is pretty high. The cost of land, labor, materials as well has made it really challenging for them to build housing at a certain price point. It's very hard to build housing that's affordable because of all of that. I do think there are things the government can do to reduce the regulatory burden. I think Boise has done a great job at rewriting their zoning code to create more flexibility in housing development. Things like if you have a corner lot, it can be a commercial in a single family neighborhood, single home neighborhood, or, you allow for more duplexes to be built in those neighborhoods, more light touch development, more, 3-4 story buildings, fourplexes, things like that. They've tried
AUDs, cottages,
ADUs, allowing more folks to build ADUs in their backyard,
I
which
said
is
AUD,
great.
didn't I?
You did. I don't know what that is. It sounds
Auxiliary unit dwelling. Unit. I
don't know. I don't know.
ADU. Keep
But
going.
yeah, so we get into STRs too later if you want.
What's an STR?
Short-term rental.
Oh yeah. Forget
That's
Airbnb.
not even-
I'm so
that's
happy.
a whole other thing.
I am so happy that
Yeah.
the day of reckoning is coming for the short-term rental, where people are realizing like, oh, this is just like we have shot and missed probably like at least 3 times on Airbnbs when we're like doing trips when my kids were younger. And we're like, oh, we're going for this wedding. Like, it's all good. We got this Airbnb. It's close by. It's great. You show up. It's disgusting and dirty. And I have like these little babies that are, I'm like, so we end up in some like last second hotel. Like, it's just, and we're like, no more. My father-in-law actually just went on this trip with my mother-in-law, and they show up and it's like a bomb went off in the house.
Oh, wow.
And like they ended up in a hotel.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is not great. But everybody sees
Let's
people
spread
online.
that rumor. Let's spread that rumor. Short-term rentals suck. Don't use them.
This is not a rumor. I think everybody, like, we could make an Instagram site or social media site just dedicated to people's nightmares from Airbnbs. And it's like, it's a thing that everybody thinks like, oh, I'll buy this house. Like, this was a big wave when interest rates started going up, because people were like, oh, I can buy this house. I can overpay for this house. It's in, you know, kind of a touristy area. I'll overpay, but like, I'm going to triple the normal rent. The neighbors hate it because now you have like crazy people coming through at all hours of the night for like 3 days, just burning the whole place down. You're like, it's a train wreck. Okay, so we could reduce regulatory burdens.
Lots of acronyms.
Yeah, right. A lot of stuff. We could reduce regulatory burdens, right? Make the soft costs for actually passing these things less, so that we could streamline development so they go a little bit faster.
Yep.
Right. So again, the paper, because we can't change the cost of lumber, right? So the fixed cost of building materials and labor is kind of difficult to fib. But from a government standpoint, it's like, look, make it go by faster. Don't kill them with all these regulations. Be a little bit more flexible with what they can do. And, you know, obviously you can distribute the price of a lot over more stories than just one, and that makes things more affordable. Obviously, that's an option.
Another thing government can do is provide financing, and that's something Idaho has done in recent years, which I'm very excited about. So
I can get along.
If you provide workforce housing, so it has to be to people at a certain income level. But one of the biggest challenges for developers, especially right now with interest rates being so high, is financing. And especially for developers that build housing that is meant for a certain income level, they're usually leveraging some kind of federal tax credit, but they have to limit it to folks that are like 80% area median income, basically like teachers, firefighters, that type. You know, and they can't get financing right now to make their project pencil. And so they're coming forward saying, I've got lots of projects on the line ready to go, but I'm just waiting to get a loan and I can't find the financing for this project to make it pencil initially. They can pay it back over time. They just got to get that upstart money to get the project done. 47 states have what's called a housing trust fund. Idaho is one of the 3 that does not. And what a housing trust fund does is it allows developers like that in those situations to apply for a loan and finance the project, make it happen, and then they pay it back over 20 to 30 years.
Oh, interesting.
So we don't have an ongoing source for something like that. However, 3 years ago, our governor put forward the budget and did put proposed $50 million to put into what we call a workforce housing fund. And it passed, thankfully, barely. But it basically was our first attempt at doing this, as being one of the 3 states that doesn't have one of these things. And over 1 year period, that money got spent on 18 projects all over the state of Idaho, created 1,100 units of housing that's affordable to working families at a lower price point. It will go back into the fund as well over the next 20 to 30 years. In the meantime,
again, that's not grant money. That's like, I loaned you this money at a reasonable interest rate that in the meantime created housing for 1,100 family units.
Yep, exactly. Gotcha. So I think that's a great thing the government can do, right? It's going to reap benefits for generations to come. This money is going to keep going back into the fund. And so it's just going to take time. So in the meantime, what developers have been asking for is, hey, can we get some more money in this fund? Because again, we've got projects ready to go that we can't build here in Idaho because we don't have the financing. So the governor did propose an additional $15 million this year for the Workforce Housing Fund. And we'll see where that goes. But that will kind of keep it going and keep more projects coming online, which we need. So
participation from the surrounding community, streamlining the bureaucratic, soft cost, having some degree of government financing for affordable housing, workforce housing. Let's not call it affordable. Nobody likes affordable housing, but they want housing for their teachers, right? Housing
Yes.
that's affordable for teachers and people working.
In Idaho, we call it workforce housing.
Workforce housing, not affordable housing.
No, not affordable
Not affordable housing. That's a dirty word.
Yes.
Okay. What else?
Other things that people can do are, I think, another thing that's really special about Idaho is we have an amazing nonprofit community. Idaho runs on nonprofits, is what I like to say. It's a common refrain that
I've been trying to get Kevin Bailey on.
You should get him.
He's the executive director of the Nonprofit Center, right?
Yeah. It's because it's true. Idaho does have to run on nonprofits. But even here in Boise, in the Treasure Valley, we have some really incredible nonprofits. That's what I do in my day job. And so very in tune with what's going on there. But I think we provide really great resources to people that are falling out of housing or have fallen out of housing to either keep them housed or get them rehoused. We're doing a really great job on that front. And so folks that are moving in here should support those nonprofits and get involved. I think, being an executive director of the nonprofit Jesse Tree, what I see is most of our donors are people that are old-time Boise folks who have lived here for a long time. And having grown up here, I know that is part of the ethos of being a Treasure Valley resident is you are part of a community. It used to feel like more small town vibes. So that's part of it,
sure.
right? Maybe, but everyone is involved in some kind of nonprofit venture, whether they're on a board or they're, donating or volunteering.
Right.
I think folks who are coming in are a little more disconnected from that maybe ethos. And we need to pull them into the nonprofit community, get them to start giving and be a part of the solutions that we're offering. So that's something else people can do.
I know we have a hard stop. Are you?
So I got a few more minutes.
Are you a fan of rent control?
I'm not a fan of rent control.
God bless you, woman. I was waiting this whole interview to get to this point.
Okay.
God bless you. Talk to me.
Yeah, I think similar to some of the property tax restrictions you see in that other states have done, where your property taxes can only go up a certain amount each.
Sure.
I think there are solutions to that we need to look at in Idaho too, because our
property
system,
tax is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have some ideas around how we can solve that here. But I think, it prevents people from moving and kind of stagnates the market.
Yes, because people essentially,
prevents people from entering the market. Yeah.
Right. And because people won't move. And it also increases friction between landlords and tenants. Because if I'm living in a house that I don't really like, but I know if I move, I'm going to have to pay like an extra $400 or $500, then I will tolerate worse conditions as a consumer. And that will create frictions between me and my landlord, because the state's essentially paying me this $500 to just shut up and take it. Right. And that always leads to bad things. And there's also a question of like, how could we prevent people from engaging in an economic decision and commerce with each other freely and have this agreement and step in and be like, no, we're going to intervene in this, even though you guys agree on it. It's, that's a broader topic, perhaps one we hit later.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy to hear you're like not a big fan.
Well, so I will say though, I like inclusionary zoning.
What does that mean?
So it allows local governments to zone certain areas and provide in a certain way where the developers are required to set limits on income for the types of folks that they can rent to. So it does encourage developers to set to essentially reduce their rents a bit. And inclusionary zoning is not allowed in Idaho. I think we should allow local governments to look at solutions like that. I don't think just like a strict blanket rent control is the solution.
Sure.
however, it's very complicated. The whole housing
Inclusionary
situation
zoning.
and inclusionary zoning would allow for local governments to at least require or incentivize more developers to set more limits on how much they charge with rent.
Wouldn't that work counter to trying to encourage development and help people pencil it out? Because they're like, hey, look, I know you could get $2,000 a month,
Right.
but we're going to ask you to take $1,500, or we're going to tell
right.
you if you want to build here, you got to take $1,500.
So that they could provide like financial incentives or, provide, housing trust fund, money, financing to kind of get those projects to pencil.
Gotcha.
In addition, yeah.
In the event that we had money in a trust fund.
In the event that which we do, and hopefully we'll have more soon, but it would be great to have that be an ongoing source of funding eventually.
I dig.
Yeah.
Senator Rabe, I appreciate you coming in. I know this is a quick interview. We just dipped our toe in this. I would love to have you back
Sure.
again and talk more about different things we can do, and even perhaps talk about to some developers who've engaged in these types of projects. Like, look, how has it panned out? I think there is a large. I interviewed somebody about a year or so ago that emphasized that every time that cities were building apartments as a ploy to turn more of the populace Democratic than Republican, because, predominantly you have renters that, renters lean more Democrat than they lean Republican. I'm like, okay, perhaps that stat is true.
We don't even know if that's true because most renters don't vote. So.
Okay, there we go. But even if that stat is true,
Right.
It's like, okay, but apartments have a place in our community. They have a place in my life trajectory, right? Like what are we going to do with a 19-year-old who wants to move out of his parents' house? And like the population has ballooned and idiots like me move in and take all the apartments. Like we need apartments for people that are coming that are not quite at home ownership age. And like we can promote home ownership, but like having every 19-year-old run around with a house is like, that's not a tenable option, right? Like we're trying to get them to all have jobs and be contributors. So again, this is really complex. And in the absence of viable interspace steps where it's like, okay, I am entering the workforce. No, I don't want to live at home, or I have to get out of my house for whatever reasons. We need these options.
We need all kinds of housing, and I think one thing that we are missing is more of the middle income housing, low income housing that allows folks to buy into their first home right now in our community. So apartments, fourplexes, duplexes, condos, those are all great too. And then, all the homes that we see being built here in the Treasure Valley as well. We need all of it. And apartments are, a piece of the puzzle.
One big thing that I just want to say at the end, if you want to get into a home, there are absolutely options. Even in an age like this, you don't need a 20% down. We have Federal Housing Association loans, FHA loans that allow, I think, like a 3.5% down payment. That's fantastic. You're going to pay a little mortgage insurance premium, fine. But like there are, I believe, condos or townhouses in the city of Eagle right now, which has the West Ada School District, which is the best, largest public school district in the state of Idaho, that are in the 300 to 400 range, right? Yeah. So if you're looking at a $400,000 purchase at let's say 3%, that's a $12,000 down payment. Right. Now, again, like you can get creative with a lot of different things, especially if you're a younger person. You get that down payment set up, and then perhaps you get a 3-bedroom, you rent out 1 or 2 to your friends. You're like, I'm not right. Like you have a lot of different options. And I think for me, I got into housing earlier in life because I learned from a lot of people. They're like, it is not this, like $200,000 cash down payment. And like, you can do these other things.
10, 20,000. However, I want to say one thing to that point. Okay. Because one thing we see is as rent costs increase, we see less and less people able to purchase a home. And that makes sense, right? What we see in the Treasure Valley right now is over half of renters are paying a majority of their income towards their rent. So if you're making an average wage in the Treasure Valley, that's going to get you maybe like $3,400 a month. Okay. Sure. Say your rent's $2,000 a month. Maybe you've got a kid. That's not going to get you far. So it's really, really hard for renters right now to save money. And that's what we see with a lot of young people that we serve in the nonprofit community, young families, mostly single parents that are struggling with paying their rent and becoming homeless for the first time. Working single parents, mostly working single mothers who, by the way, have recently survived domestic violence, but they're struggling to pay their rent every month. And so how are they supposed to get to a place where they can save up? We're seeing people struggle to even save up $500
Right.
because their rent's so expensive. So I see what you're saying. It's
I get what you're saying,
possible.
though. Here, one thing I do want to say, though, like
Yeah.
you are talking about the most destitute position possible, right? So that, and I'm not saying these people don't exist, and my heart goes out to every single one of them, but this is also an emphasis of like, look, there are better and worse decisions to make. And by the way, if you end up in this position, that's really, really bad. And that's not, I'm not like victim blaming or anything. I'm just saying, like, I think that we should take a look at housing for the good of the community and perhaps not come at it from the standpoint of like, okay, the abused single mom. It's like, yes, that's a terrible situation. But like, that's also an exception. That's not the rule to people that struggle with housing, right? There are plenty of, so you think there are more people, the majority of people that struggle with housing costs are abused single moms?
Of all of the families that we see who are homeless in our community right now, a huge majority are survivors of domestic violence in single parents households.
So like literally over 50%.
And I think yes.
Okay, I stand
over
corrected.
50%. And
so the people that you guys interact with, it's like
I'm trying
over 50% or
I'll
like
come back
moms.
to you with the exact percentage.
It's okay. Like, it's okay. I get it. And again, this is why I really like having somebody like you, because my perspective is, or it was until 30 seconds ago, it's like, okay, but we're talking about the exception. And if you're saying, no, this is not the exception, then it's like, oh, snap. Okay. Understood.
Yeah. Circling back to where we were before talking about homelessness and who's homeless, who's more likely to end up homeless, right? It is the folks who, have more issues with substance use and mental health. But the more unaffordable your housing gets, more and more regular working people that, maybe don't have as many issues end up in these situations because they're paying a majority of their rent towards their majority of their income towards their rent, and life happens to them. Life happens to me. I just had to get my kid to the ER like a few weeks. He's fine.
Oh my God.
He's fine. But,
I'm so sorry.
But then you get the medical bill and you're like, well, dang.
Oh, shoot me in the face.
But that happens to everyone. And if you don't have a safety net because you're unable to save every month, you're just much more likely to end up in the eviction process and then end up homeless as well. So I just think it's important to note that in our community, the people who are homeless right now or becoming homeless are renters who have been making it work. They've been living here maybe for several years, maybe their entire lives, and they've never been in this situation before. The people that we're seeing end up in the system are new to the system. Because the population has grown, right? Just the last couple of years, the homeless population has doubled.
What is the homeless population? Like when you say doubled?
Well, so in Ada County right now, it's hard to know how many people are homeless, truly, because a lot of people are informally housed, couch surfing, living in hotels. But the number that we absolutely know is around 2,000 people.
And it used to be 1,000.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Senator Rabe, thank you for coming in. You got to go get your kid. I really appreciate you. I want to keep having this conversation. Let's get something else scheduled.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
We'll talk soon.